Joining us now, he is the president of Americans for Prosperity, Tim Phillips. He's had a long career there, and Americans for Prosperity Virginia chapter, one of the most active chapters they have in America. 400,000 activists they have on their list. They have offices all over the place, and as always, they're involved in the biggest issues of the day, and he is joining us now. Tim Phillips. President Tim Phillips, good to have you with us, sir.
John, good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
So, Tim, before we get into HR1 and some of the things that AFP is working on, you're a Virginian, like me. I mean, I'm not really a Virginian, but I'm in Virginia. I'm a transplanted Virginian. You're an original. So, look, what do you think of this Three Stooges Act that's going on here?
It's been embarrassing for the Commonwealth of Virginia. I've lived here for 23 of the last 30 years of my life. I took a sojourn to Georgia for a while and started a business way back in the day, but came back. And it's embarrassing. And I hope that these guys, some of them get their act together and do the right thing. And it's been an embarrassment. I'm on the road a lot with Americans for Prosperity. Folks know I'm from Virginia. And frankly, John, it is embarrassing that people say, well, what's going on in your state? And by the way, that's Republicans and Democrats, it's conservatives, it's liberals. It's not a partisan thing. It's just an embarrassment across the board.
What do you think the answer is? I mean, do you think this, look, I mean, Republicans in Virginia were facing electoral generational Armageddon in 2019. They were going to lose everything. Now, I think they're going to keep the House. Kirk Cox is going to maintain the speakership. They got an outside shot to keep the state Senate also. What type of a longer-term impact on Virginia do you think this may have electorally?
That's a good question. I am not one to start doing the political punditry analysis on election trends and all that. That's not what I do. I go out and do policies and issues with our organization. So the voters will decide, but it is an embarrassment. I'll leave it at that. It's an embarrassment for our Commonwealth to have the three top state elected officials embroiled in these it's embarrassing. I know I keep saying that word, but it is. I mean, there's no way around this, and the state needs to move on from this, and I think there's hypocrisy on the part of a lot of Democrats here who, and I know it's rife on both sides. I get it, but hopefully there'll be some movement soon. And I do think, I know I live out toward Leesburg in Loudoun County, John, and I know that a lot of average voters are aware of it and talking about it. And I do think, therefore, it will have an impact.
Well, we're going to see what happens. I think it is going to have an impact, certainly in the House races, and I am a political pundit, as you know. I'm predicting.
You're a good one. I'll leave that to you and others as to how deep of an impact it makes. But, there's that point when an issue is really only swirling around and noticed in the political class, right? You and I have seen issues like that. This issue is far deeper and broader than that.
Right. That's why I think the Republicans gained 5 to 8 seats in the House. I don't know about the state Senate right now. A lot of people retiring on the GOP side like Wagner, but we'll see how it goes. I want to shift gears to a national issue. We're with President of Americans for Prosperity, Tim Phillips, with us. Tim Phillips, Americans for Prosperity is opposing a House bill. It's called HR1. Here's what's interesting. AFP is opposing it. The ACLU is opposing it. Now, they're strange bedfellows right there. Right. The White House is opposing it. Can you articulate, Tim Phillips, to our listeners, what is HR1, why is it important, and why are you opposed to its passage?
There are many things wrong with it, but I'll focus on two this morning, John. First, HR1 will force outside organizations like Americans for Prosperity, like the American Civil Liberties Union, groups on the left and right, to disclose the identity of all of their donors if they take part in issue battles or political election battles that mention or name an incumbent member of Congress, or really any candidate running for federal office. Now, we saw during the Obama years, John, you and I remember these well, we lived them, when the IRS was politicized against Tea Party groups and others, mostly on the right, that were simply citizens were wanting to take part in the policy process. And the IRS, the office in Ohio specifically, took their names down and began attacking them. It is a good thing that, given all the attacks, certainly on Americans for Prosperity over the years by politicians who don't like some of the issues we're involved in, it's a good thing that the identity of our donors are protected. There's also, by the way, a constitutional question. The First Amendment says you have free speech, and that court decisions have shown that means anonymous speech as well. And so, first, it forces the identity to be made open of donors. Secondly, if you basically mention the name of a member of Congress on an issue, battle, or election, it puts severe restrictions on exactly what your organization can do, and basically limits you, cuts back on your ability to be able to do your job, which is to talk to citizens, to voters about key issues. It will basically put C4s and organizations on the left and the right, but especially on the free market or conservative side, out of business. And that's a terrible thing for democracy and certainly for representative democracy. So there's a lot of things that are especially wrong with it. Those are the two worst.
So why are the House Democrats in favor of this, or so many of them?
Because they think that they're going to have a funding advantage over their political opponents if they can do away with outside groups. Now, that's not true, by the way. In fact, there's as much dark money, if you want to call it dark money. I don't. I call it money that is, groups that are C4s and C6 and C3s that are out there. It's roughly even on all the ideological spectrum at this point. But I think these members of Congress, they want the Democrats who are pushing this, mostly Democrats. I don't know really any Republicans at this point who are really pushing this. I think they want to do away with competition, John. It's a power grab by these Democrats to say, hey, we want to make sure we eliminate voices that can challenge us, whether it's on the idea of raising taxes or whether it's on the idea of doing away with private health insurance and making this full-on single-payer program in this country. There are big issues out there. And I think in the end, this is about silencing voices, John. It is anti-free speech. It takes away the right of Americans to associate with organizations like Americans for Prosperity, or really, again, I'm particularizing it to the organization I work for, because obviously I think about Americans for Prosperity the most. But really, it takes away the right of citizens to associate in a way that can protect their privacy, their identity. And given the assault we've seen on Americans who have chosen to get involved in the policy or the political process from the media and from ideological foes, given the assault we've seen, given the abuses of the IRS that we've seen, John, certainly during the Obama years, and going back before that during the Nixon years, that's a serious thing. So H.R. 1 is one of these innocuous-sounding good government bills. It's anything but.
What are the Democrats actually calling the bill?
They are calling. Now I'm drawing a complete blank on it, John. But it's one of these Orwellian-sounding names. I'm drawing a complete blank on it because I'm so used to saying, hey, it's HR 1 and these guys want to do that. It's something like the good government or the clean government. I'm forgetting the exact wording, but it's one of these Orwellian names that is the opposite of what it's actually called. But it's HR 1 is what we're calling it, just referring to it as HR 1. But it's the silencing of free speech in this country. That's what it's doing. And it takes away the competition to these members of Congress, to these politicians. And they don't like competition, John.
Well, I tell you what, they're going to vote on this. They don't have the votes right now to get it through the Senate, because Mitch McConnell said even if it passes the House, he's not even going to give it a vote. And it's kind of like it's kind of like the Affordable Care Act, right? It was anything but affordable. It's the exact opposite. But I think it's called the what's it called, the Open and Fair Elections Act or something.
That's it. I'm sorry. Thank you for saving me, John. I was drawing, when you asked it, I was drawing a complete blank. Yeah, the Open and Fair Elections, when in fact what it's doing is taking away the rights of groups like Americans for Prosperity and others on the left and right, but to actually be able to do television ads, radio ads, to do door knocking and phone calls and work from our field offices, it takes away that right for us to do it on issues or elections where members of Congress, federal Congress, are involved. It is the ultimate Incumbent Protection Act, and it dramatically tears into the First Amendment rights of so many Americans and the right to association of so many Americans. So it's a threat. We would urge you, I mean, you're right. At this point, the Senate is saying, and good for Mitch McConnell and good for the president also to say, hey, this is a bad idea. He's been on this and aggressive. But it's important for these members, you know, even when the legislation, there was no pathway forward in the Senate, it's still good for these House and Senate members to hear from people. Sit back home saying, hey, look, this H.R. 1 thing, this thing that the Democrats are claiming is a good government and all this, vote against it. It's not. Because it's good for them to know there's strong opposition to this kind of nonsense and this kind of danger back home in their district. So I would urge your listeners to be involved.
Well, you have to get involved in this because, you know, one of the things in the stipulation is obviously they want same-day registration. I mean, that's one of the things they want, where basically you go in to vote and you just register that minute right at the voting booth. I mean, it's just anything that they can do to get illegals to vote, not check the box. I mean, the whole thing, the vote harvesting in California, they want to make that standard. So you just bang on doors with absentee ballots, get people to sign them, fill out what you want, take them back. There's no security with it. I mean, they talk about the Republicans, but the reality of it is the Democrats want to rig the system so they can maintain power. This is what this whole thing is about. And Tim Phillips, you absolutely nailed it.
This is an aggressive power grab.
Right.
That's exactly what it is, an aggressive power grab. And it will dramatically curtail the First Amendment rights of so many Americans. And imagine the intimidation and the effort to shame and to scare and to attack people who give to organizations like Americans for Prosperity if something like this were passed. We've seen this in other places, other countries, or other states on at the state level, where the identity of donors and activists were disclosed, and we've seen the attacks on them. Mm-hmm. And so this is a serious piece of legislation. We're glad that the ACLU, good for them for stepping up on this.
Exactly.
And certainly it means a lot to have President Trump speaking out about this.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking the Truth Across America. We're with the president of Americans for Prosperity National Organization, Tim Phillips. He's a Virginian. Tim, I want to get to the Trump tax cut plan, which has been absolutely phenomenal for the economy. Just unbelievable. The number of new businesses starting, the number of, here's a fact you probably didn't know. We have the lowest unemployment now for disabled Americans in history since we've been recording it. That's number one. Second thing, you probably didn't know this either, that 70% of all new people who came into the workforce in 2018, these are people that got jobs that didn't have jobs, 70% of them had been out of work for at least an 8-year period. That's the average. So they're getting back to work. They couldn't find a job after the recession. They gave up. Now they're reemerging. Phenomenal. 58% of them women. I bet you also didn't know, Tim Phillips, very quickly, that the majority of all new businesses opened in the last 6 months of 2018 were by African American and Hispanic women. I mean, this economy is just exploding. Part of it, the tax cut, part of it, deregulation. What is Americans for Prosperity's top priority in 2019 after HR 1?
Well, and by the way, you mentioned the tax cuts and tax reform. Let me just take a moment, John. That tax reform, once in a generation, it was done by one of the best efforts I've ever seen from Senate and House Republicans and this president. And the president personally was laser beam focused, especially on lowering that corporate rate because American businesses were unfairly penalized when they were competing against other the companies and businesses around the world who had far lower corporate tax rates. He was such a crucial point, and it's one reason this economy has turned around and is growing. The other reason, and I know you know this, but the other reason that this economy is growing so well is the determined effort to remove the barrier of regulation and red tape that this administration has also undertaken. John, it's been something across the entire administration to lower or get rid of regulation and red tape that has harmed so many American businesses, especially small businesses. Those are the two key 1-2 punches that have gotten this economy moving again. The other issue we're focusing on right now is trade, and it's one where we disagree with the president in all candor. He has used tariffs, and they don't work. Protectionism never works. It hasn't worked in the 1930s when it helped bring about the Depression, and we worry that if this path continues, whether it's steel tariffs that are taking American steel businesses and helping them win, but it's hurting a lot of other folks in the economy, and we worry that all the tariffs that he's using are going to undermine the economic growth that his tax policies and deregulation have actually brought about. And so it's one where we disagree a lot with some of our good conservative brethren and sisters on this, but we disagree with the president on this. And it's when you look at the numbers, John, the numbers tell us that the tariffs are costing more jobs than they're bringing in for American steel. Chamber of Commerce estimating that 200,000 American jobs have been lost in businesses that are hurt by higher steel prices. And that's multiple times more jobs than the steel industry has created because of these tariffs. So it's one where there's a lot of disagreement on the conservative side, but that's a big priority for us.
Well, look, there's we're going to see how this plays out, but right now the economy booming. Although the job numbers today, only 20,000 jobs added in February, but this was after 300,000 added in January, so that was under expectations. I'm wrapping up here. I'm running out of time. I want to thank Tim Phillips for being with us. Americans for Prosperity, a founding sponsor of the John Fredericks Show when we first started.
And we're proud to be, John. We are proud to be.
Well, Tim, you guys believed in me when I had an idea, and I'll never forget the conversation we had. You said, it's been tried. It's never been done. The odds are against you, but if anybody can do it, it's John Fredericks. And you said, I'm going to...
That's exactly it. And you did it, my friend.
That's right.
You're doing it today. And congratulations, and keep it up. Don't you get lazy on us now. You keep it up, all right?
All right, sir. Thank you. Tim Phillips, President of Americans for Prosperity. He told me it couldn't be done, but if anybody could do it, it could be me. That inspired me. All right, I got to go, but thank you.